Hi everybody, it's Leela with MISSKISS Kreations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's tumbler tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created this beautiful glittered alcohol ink tumbler. Like always, all of my materials will be listed in my description below, including some direct links and coupon codes. And my decal will be listed in my Etsy shop, and that will also be linked in my description below. I will also have some help tutorials for all of my beginner viewers. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this tumbler. I'm starting with a 20-ounce skinny stainless steel tumbler from Maker Flow Crafts. I first sand this tumbler down and then I wipe it down with 91% alcohol. Once I finish wiping it down with 91% alcohol, I paint the entire tumbler white with a white pop of color paint. I make sure to paint the entire tumbler white. I want to make sure I paint all of the tumbler white because this paint is going to act as my adhesive for my glitter. This is completely up to you, this step. You can use any adhesive you like to apply your glitter, but I am using my paint to apply my glitter. As you see, I'm using Diamonds 2.0 from Glitter Heart Co. and I place the diamonds all around my tumbler while my paint is still wet. And then I started to add the paint to the bottom of the tumbler. Once I added all the paint to the bottom, I then added a coat of glitter on top of that. Once I finished adding all of my glitter around my tumbler, I let my tumbler sit, let the paint dry underneath the glitter, make sure that is completely dry. It took about 20 to 25 minutes. It is going to depend on how much paint you added to your tumbler. So the thicker paint that you add, the longer wait time it's going to have to dry. And once my paint was dry underneath my glitter, I went in with some Mod Podge and I applied Mod Podge over that glitter. The reason why I chose Mod Podge and not the paint is because the Mod Podge dried clear and the paint would dry as white. So I wanted to make sure that you could still see that glitter underneath that adhesive. I chose to add 2 coats of glitter because this is a white tumbler, and sometimes with white and white glitters, they are transparent. So I wanted to make sure I had a full covered tumbler, and my tumbler was completely covered with this gorgeous glitter. And once I finished applying all of my glitter on my tumbler, I went in with my Krylon crystal clear acrylic coating and I sprayed it. I do not wait for the Mod Podge to be dry. I just go in with that crystal clear acrylic coating and I sprayed 3 generous coats. I do let the crystal clear acrylic coating dry before I move on to epoxying. So now you see me epoxying my tumbler. This is a 20-ounce skinny, so I use 20 milliliters of epoxy for this tumbler. That's 10 milliliters part A and 10 milliliters part B, totaling 20 milliliters of epoxy. This was my fast set epoxy, so this took about 2 hours to dry. If you are using regular epoxy, you should allow your tumbler to dry up to 24 hours until you move on to the next step. So I'm going to apply this epoxy and I'll see y'all with the next step. And then once my epoxy was dry on my tumbler, I went in with my 120 grit sanding block and I sand all around the tumbler, including the top of the tumbler. And then once I finish with my sanding, I am then moving on with the fun part, which is adding all of those alcohol inks on this tumbler. Notice how I do have my space covered because alcohol inks do stain and sometimes they're a pain in the butt to get out. So I am using my makeup wedges and I am taking some alcohol ink and I'm dabbing it around my tumbler. I will have all of my colors listed in my description below that I am using. And you can also use paper towels, you can use Q-tips, you can use whatever you have on hand. Even if you don't have those materials, I would even try just using a gloved finger and just dabbing the alcohol ink into that tumbler. Now you can see that I'm adding different colors here. I am trying to create layers. So with this tumbler, this is what my goal was, to try to make so many layers on this tumbler to make it really come together at the end, and you'll see how it all blends together beautifully. So you'll see that light blue does get lost behind all of these layers, but each layer is very important because I think that's what really brings out this tumbler. So this is just going in fast forward. I'm just showing you just all the random colors that I'm choosing. I went into my alcohol ink box and I just grabbed all of these blues and just put them and placed them together. You can see that they're blending very beautifully. That nice dark blue I have there is going on top of all of those lighter colors, and it's just adding all of that depth to the tumbler that I'm really looking for. Really have fun with this. Don't overthink this part. I know I say that a lot, but you're just really dabbing on colors and just really creating something beautiful, and you're still going to see that beautiful Diamonds 2.0 peek through this design. I decided to take some 91% alcohol and use that to kind of push those colors where I wanted them to go and create some like veins in the tumbler, and to kind of dilute some of those colors, make some of those colors spread out more. And I just had fun with it, and I created some art on this tumbler. So I didn't overthink it. Any spots that were kind of dark or I thought that was poking out more than what I wanted them to, I just take that 91% alcohol, I put it on my wedge brush as you see, and then I dab around those colors. It's easy as that. I also wanted to try another method using a paintbrush, and taking my paintbrush and adding lines down the tumbler. Once I added the lines, I took that 91% alcohol and I cleaned up half of that line to make the tumbler look like it had some veins running through or some really thin lines with alcohol ink. So I made sure to use the darker color for this and then clean up the line with the 91% alcohol, and I think it turned out really well. And you'll notice me cutting some wedges just to save on materials, and now I'm going in with some gold alcohol ink. This is not the Fixative, this is just regular gold from Piñata, and I'm adding that on top of those blue alcohol inks. I didn't seal the blue alcohol inks with anything. I'm going right in. I didn't let it dry. If you've worked with alcohol inks in the past, you know how quickly they dry. So you see how that gold just stacks right on top of that blue. It blends well with that blue. That's what I wanted. I wanted that gold to just be an accent and to really blend on top of those colors, and it works so beautifully. And then I decided to go in with the gold again with my paintbrush, just to show y'all another technique on how to apply those inks to the tumbler, just in case you don't have any of those makeup wedges on hand. And for my next layer, I decided to use the Fixative Gold from Tim Holtz. This Fixative is different than regular alcohol inks because it comes out a little thicker. So you can see I layered that over that gold alcohol ink and it turned out so pretty. So it looked really, really good over. So I decided to add more of that gold and then more of the Fixative. So I added just the regular alcohol ink, and then over top the alcohol ink gold color, I added that Fixative. Again, the Fixative is a lot thicker than the regular alcohol ink, so it comes out less transparent and it's more of a solid color, and it really pops on this tumbler. And just when you thought I was finished, I was not. I decided to use my Patina Effect paint or paste. It is the color blue, and I decided to add that all around the tumbler. This paste is like a paint, but it's a lot thicker than acrylic paint. So you're going to see me apply this mostly with my gloved finger. This was very easy to apply. I just dabbed it on with the brush and then I rubbed it around the tumbler, and it made such a cool effect. So I added that around the gold so I can have another layer on top of all the multiple layers that I already have. This paste dries so quickly. It dries just as fast as alcohol ink does, especially whenever you're rubbing it around the tumbler. And then for my last layer, I decided to use brass, and I applied it around the tumbler. I mostly applied it around the gold areas because I wanted those layers around those areas, and I took it on my paintbrush, or I painted it on my paintbrush, and I blotted it. So you'll see exactly what I did. The little amount that I used for this was unreal, and I applied it all around those gold areas to really make those colors pop even more and to add yet another layer. And once I was finished with this tumbler, I let this tumbler sit for 24 hours. I let it air dry. I found that whenever you're working with alcohol inks, that's probably for me personally, the easiest way to let my inks sit and really stick to that tumbler. I never spray my tumbler because it will separate all the colors, and I never wipe it with Mod Podge or a sealer because it's going to wipe away the colors. If I went in with epoxy immediately, then it's going to fade those alcohol ink colors. So let your tumbler sit for at least 24 hours before going in with the epoxy. And once my tumbler sat for 24 hours, I went in with 10 milliliters of epoxy. That's 5 milliliters part A and 5 milliliters part B, totaling 10 milliliters of epoxy. The reason why I'm using so little epoxy is because this epoxy is just being used to seal this design in. I still have to go in with my decal. So there's 3 layers of epoxy on this tumbler. So you want to use as little epoxy as you can use, so this tumbler isn't really bulky or thick. Once I laid my epoxy, I went in with some Socialite from Glitter Heart Co. and I added some of that chunky glitter in areas where I felt needed. So I just went around and I added a little specks of that just to layer on some more and to really add even more depth to this tumbler. And once I was satisfied with how much glitter I applied to my tumbler, I then let my epoxy cure on my tumbler, again using my fast set epoxy. So it took about 2 hours for the epoxy to dry to the touch, and then we'll move on with adding the decal to the tumbler. And here's my tumbler with the epoxy cured. How gorgeous does this look? So I'm moving on with adding the decal over my tumbler, and before I add my decal, I make sure to wipe that area down with 91% alcohol. This decal is available on my Etsy shop. The link will be linked in my description below. Now you're going to see me add a dark color decal, so I ended up adding that dark color decal and then removing it, adding a light color decal, and then the dark over the light to add that layer. So like I said, watch me add this dark color decal here. I really did like it, but I wanted another layer, so I removed this one and I added the light color. And here is that light color decal that I placed on the tumbler. I'm going to add that darker color decal over the lighter color decal just because I wanted to add yet another layer. So these decals are the same size. I cut them the same size and I placed the light one, and all I do is place that dark one just to the right of the lighter one, and I'm creating the smallest amount of shadow. You barely can see it, but you can see a little bit of that light decal. I didn't want a dramatic offset. I just wanted something very subtle so you couldn't really see it too much, but I just knew that it was there. And you can see that subtle shadow that I created behind that darker decal. Before I go in with my epoxy, I'm using my Quick Coat from CC DIY. This is just a sealer that helps your decal stay put on the tumbler. A lot of times with these finer decals, the epoxy likes to lift the decal, so this keeps the decals in place on the tumbler, having no issues when I go into epoxy. And then for my final coat of epoxy, I mixed 20 milliliters of epoxy. That's 10 milliliters part A and 10 milliliters part B, totaling 20 milliliters of epoxy. I ended up using about 18 milliliters of epoxy on this tumbler. I didn't want to add too much because I already have those other 2 layers of epoxy on my tumbler. I did use my regular epoxy, so I allowed my tumbler to spin on the cup turner for 4 hours. After 4 hours, I turned off my cup turner, removed my pipe from the turner, and placed it on my drying rack for another 20 hours. So my total drying or curing time for this tumbler was 24 hours. And here is the final tumbler. I really hope you guys can use this tumbler to inspire you to create something beautiful. And if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more tumbler and craft videos. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see y'all next time.